Go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vince Lanci, and joining me today are two people that I think are very important voices in the precious metals arena. And given the current situation with regards to deliveries out of London and deliveries to the US and the re-engagement of deliveries into China, I've invited both of them to speak. Actually, they've invited me to have a conversation with them, so I'm very happy. There has been, well, let me just introduce them first. Right? We've got Dave Kranzler, right? And we've got Eric Yeung. Now, Dave is a respected veteran in the precious metals industry. He is the managing owner of Golden Returns Capital and publisher of the well-known Mining Stock Journal, which comes out twice monthly. He's known for insightful market analysis and decades of experience trading gold, silver, and other valuable metals. If you're as old as me, you remember he is also an active contributor to GATA. Eric, hi, David. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Vince. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, this is fun. This is fun. Let's see if we can make it work, right? Eric, also known as King Kong on social media. He is out of Hong Kong, mostly with strong ties to mainland China and the US. Eric's roots are as an entrepreneur in manufacturing with a subsequent deep knowledge base and financial stake in metals from a uniquely China perspective. Eric, like David, is also known for advocating transparency in bullion markets. All right, Eric, did I do you justice?
Hey, thank you, Vince. Thank you for having me on today.
What time is it
Thank
where
you.
you are?
It's 12:30 a.m. in the
Oh,
morning.
excellent.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so there you go. Money never sleeps. All right, so the reason for this conversation, we haven't titled it yet, but the three of us will figure out afterwards. There has been much discussion surrounding the recent repatriation of gold and silver to the US, while China has simultaneously begun drawing more metal towards its own vaults. All of this coincides with Donald Trump's election, although it has been going on for some time. His threat of tariffs, a growing discord amongst trade partners, including Europe and elsewhere, are part of that problem. The epicenter, as we've all agreed to, or observable source for all this gold that's being pulled to the corners of the world and silver, is London. And that will be probably the geographic epicenter of our conversation today. So, how do you want to start this off, guys? Uh, Dave, how do you want? What do you want to talk about? What's going on in New York City and London? Paraphrasing your own question.
Perfect. Yeah.
So, what do you think? What's going on in New York
Oh,
City?
this is if what's going on, if I'm right about what I think is going on, because I think it's important to know that it's impossible to get really good information, right, on the flows of physical gold and silver globally. It's intentionally kept opaque, especially by the Western interests. And so if what I think is happening, I've been waiting for 20 years for this to start happening. And GATA, you mentioned GATA, they actually were writing about this potential, 25 years ago, where you have a massive short interest in physical bars, right? It's derivatives based. It's also bars that are leased out by central banks, even bars that are leased out or swapped by the BIS. And
Right.
and they always thought, and I've always thought that at some point, if enough of the counterparties decide that they want to not only just take delivery of their bars, but take possession of them rather than leave them in the London vaults. And I'm not talking about high net worth people and retail. I'm talking about sovereigns and central banks. And, I think there's wealthy family offices involved now and very wealthy people. And I always thought that if they started to actually want to take possession of their bars, we'd start to see a shortage that potentially could squeeze the market. And you mentioned that, the flows between London and New York that kind of started since Trump got elected, probably started before that. But really, what I think stimulated, I mean, China for a long, long time, like longer than any of us can possibly know, has always been taking possession of their bars that they buy. They leave some in London for trading liquidity, whatever. But they've always been taking possession of their bars. And I think what's happened is that when the U.S. seized Russia's assets being held in Western central banks, a light bulb went off with a lot of other Eastern Hemisphere central banks that have been buying gold, but leaving the bars in the London vaults, right? And you leave the bars in those vaults, and the banks that have custody of those bars are free to do what they want with those bars, right? They're just accounting
Right.
records. So and so what's happened is is you've had a lot more countries and central banks decide that they're going to repatriate their bars. They want possession of them. They don't want to just have a piece of paper that says they're sitting in a London vault. And I mean, even India has announced recently that they've repatriated a couple hundred tons. Poland's repatriating gold now. There's several other Eastern Hemisphere central banks that are repatriating gold. And I think what's happened is it's created a shortage of unencumbered bars that can be delivered to the rightful owners who want possession of them. And I think that's what we're seeing right now.
I think that's spot on. You're describing I mean, it seems like it's decades ago now, but it was in 2021 during right after COVID that we began to realize that supply chains were breaking, and it became manifest first, obviously, to the public in the BRICS, and they started, as you said, India, China, they started wanting their gold, and at first, the mainstream media, most people did not really understand why. What's the big deal? It's just gold. And the reality of it is, as you implied, is that they wanted their physical gold back. We talked about this. Taking delivery versus taking possession is an entirely different level. So not only were they taking delivery and storing it in the Bank of England or the LBMA vault or even on the COMEX, they were taking delivery and then taking possession. And that was, as you said, a breakdown of trust as evidenced with their confiscation of the Russian wealth. And that's like, you know what? I think I'd rather have gold in treasuries than I need to have it in my possession. I think that's a significant moment that you describe that's been going on. And what did it lead to? We have a crisis of collateral. I agree. I agree with that. Eric, what do you think?
I think it's just what happened in the last 2.5 months, and what is continuing to happen is pretty out of the ordinary. It's crazy. You guys know the numbers, but I'm going to say it again.
Yeah.
Just 2 weeks ago, StoneX reported that the US imported around 2,000 metric tons of physical gold into the country.
I'm going to share a
So,
picture while you're doing that because
yeah.
I think we got a good visual aid for you. Okay, keep going.
Okay, so 2,000 tons plus by now, because now it's like 2 weeks after StoneX. By the way, StoneX is a LBMA member. They are a participant of the PM LBMA gold and silver price fix. So these guys are not nobodies. I mean, they're high up there, right?
They're very
So
well
they're saying
connected.
that very well connected.
Right?
So they're saying 2,000 metric tons plus, right? But think about this. The LBMA only imported around 700 metric tons in
Right.
that same period. So
Right.
you have 1,300 metric tons unaccounted for. And then our mutual, friend, me and Dave's mutual friend, Ronan Manny, pointed
Yeah.
out today, and I see that you also commented on it, Vince, today, his
Yeah.
post, right? That, um, you know, uh, the gold import numbers only reflect the LBMA numbers. Only reflect the COMEX import numbers of
Right.
that 700 tons, right? So
Right.
what's happening with the 1,300 tons, the rest of it, like of those 2,000 tons that the US imported in that period, right?
What do you
And
think is
Ron and Manny said that it has to be monetary gold. Because if it's monetary gold imported into the US, it doesn't need to be admitted into the import numbers. And that
okay?
makes sense, right? So monetary gold. So that kind of it's not kind of, it does support my thesis that the US government, the Fed, or the proxies is the
Right.
final customer standing for delivery for this gold. I'm not talking about just COMEX. I'm talking about OTC, right? Because really, what StoneX is saying is that there is 1,300, like 1,300 metric tons of physical gold that were imported by OTC, which is over the counter, over the counter, like offshore, right? Somewhere, I don't know, like Australia, Africa, etc., right?
Right.
That came
Right.
in without going through the LBMA.
Right.
Okay. So so having said that, that's like I think like huge news today that came out that I thought, wow, like that's most likely like Ron and Manny said that's monetary gold, right?
Right. Right.
And
Right.
then on top of that, I do want to comment on what Dave said about the concentrated short positions at the COMEX for
Okay.
both gold and silver, because that's what Jim Sinclair and Ted Butler said, right? All these years,
Right.
they continually said the same thing, right? And yes, it's there, but I'm going to tell you guys this, and you guys probably know this already, right? For most of those short positions that they have at the COMEX, these bullion banks, they have an equivalent, long paper long position at the LBMA. Okay, so that's what they call the EFP trading pair.
Right.
So they were
Right.
short the COMEX. It's like a basis trade, right? That's that very definition of a
Right.
basis trade. So they short the COMEX and they long the LBMA.
Yeah.
But
That,
remember this though, right? Remember this though,
no,
right?
I
The
remember.
LBM. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, no. So I just want to stop for 1 second. For
Yeah.
those that are not familiar, the EFP is a spread that measures the demand versus the demand in, let's just say, Europe versus the US. And the EFP really doesn't account for actual fresh demand. But Eric's point is that the EFP has some very large open interest that has accumulated over years. I'm sorry, Eric. Go ahead.
It's okay. I'm just gonna Vince, you got a very good point. Like I got to kind of explain what EFP is before we move on. So
Right.
what EFP is on a you know um, layman's perspective, okay? It's just a contract that allows two parties to settle off exchange. Like they
Right.
call it off exchanges, but you still go through the COMEX clearport or whatever they call it, right?
Right.
It's basically not you're not settling at the COMEX, you're settling off exchange. But
Right.
normally 90% of what happens there is that it's just a cash settlement. There's no physical.
Right.
So they would just like settle two contracts and they settle the arbitrage, whatever it is, right?
Right.
But at times what they can do is they can bring the physical, from in this case, I'm talking about short the COMEX, long the LBMA. So they stand for delivery at the LBMA and they bring the metal to the COMEX and settle at the EFP at the COMEX.
Right.
So still outside the exchange, right? You
Right.
bring the
Right.
metal to whoever is standing for delivery at the COMEX. Okay, so that's how EFP works, right?
Right.
But yeah, just continuing what I just said, right? So they massively short the COMEX and they long the LBMA contract.
Right.
But what they're long with at the LBMA, first of all, is a piece of paper. It's a paper promissory note, as we see now, right? Because it doesn't guarantee that you'll get a metal. Like for example, what's happening in the last 2 months, 2.5 months, you can have that cash contract or like spot contract or futures or the forward contract at the LBMA. But your delivery time is T plus two. It went from T plus two to T plus 60 or T plus 90. So it doesn't
Right.
guarantee you that you get a metal, right? At the LBMA.
Well,
So
that's
to
that's
Dave's
essentially
point,
that's essentially a default, right?
that's essentially the default. But they are see, but the LBMA is this OTC market, right? Over the counter.
Right.
So what that means is that they have certain rules, but essentially it's a private transaction between the buyer and the seller.
Right.
So that's why they can do this. They can elongate that delivery time indefinitely because there's no exchange rules at the LBMA. So
Right.
what I'm trying to say is that on the macro point of view, what they did, what this is I look at the LBMA and the COMEX as one entity,
Mhm.
and they offshored the manipulation to LBMA. You see,
Right.
right?
Well,
You do see that? You
ultimately,
can do all this stuff, right? You can elongate your delivery time. you can, I'm just, because I'm on the roll, I'm just going to finish this, right? You can flood the LBMA with like 10, 100 to 1, 400 to 1, paper to physical contracts, which it was before all this happened in the past, right? You can do like, naked shorts, which is, you can't short on the LBMA because it's a cash market, right? But you can buy forward contracts. I'm sorry, you can sell forward contracts, right? If you're
Right.
selling a forward contract, you're shorting.
There is a
You're shorting.
paper market in the LBMA. It's just
Correct.
not well known. Right.
Yeah. So it's a huge paper market. It's also a physical market. The paper market is a lot bigger. And what the banksters did is they offshore the manipulation to the LBMA mostly. Okay.
Well, it's
At
it's
the
kind of
COMEX, they're shorting, right? So that's why, remember, Vince, me and you, we talked to, like, I'm not going to name names, but like the people who are like LBMA shows, right?
right.
And I see Dave, arguing with them too. And every single time, these people are saying, you guys don't understand the EFP trading curve. Like, we are not naked short at the COMEX. And they're right. They are not naked short at the COMEX, but they are essentially shorting at the LBMA.
Let me just add something in a big yin yang way. So to your point about before I bring this back to something Dave had said, the EFP is the price of commodities, specifically gold and silver, is the last thing to move when there's a crisis. They will use the EFP to kind of move problems from left to right. They will borrow from Peter to pay Paul on the physical. Now, the what Eric just said kind of inspired me to make a statement. Hopefully, it's true. As the physical market becomes more and more American, the metals coming here, the paper market is becoming more and more London. So it's kind of like if the rehypothecation is no longer here because we're taking delivery, then it has moved there. It's almost like there's a role reversal between this uneasy partnership that we have. Anyway, does that pretty much summarize at least what's going on right now? At least, Eric?
I think so. I think, like, if you look at what happened in the last 2.5 months, let me give you some numbers, okay?
Sure.
And
Yeah,
you
that's
guys
good.
will agree with me. Give you some concrete numbers, right?
You just saw some numbers today. Hold on.
Yeah,
You saw numbers today, right?
but I'll give you some concrete numbers to prove your point, what you just
Right.
said. Because you're saying that the COMEX is becoming a physical market, right? So
Right.
let's look at this, okay? How much metal do you think the LBMA delivered on average before all this crap happened on an average year?
I'm not even
900 metric tons. I'm just going to tell you, right? 900 metric tons of physical gold. How
Okay.
much gold did the US import? We're not going to question this because it's real. StoneX said it. Bullion Vault said this. 2,000 metric tons in 2.5 months. So if you
Right.
let's say I'm like let's say I'm just going to grossly, lowball this year, 2025, the US is probably going to be on track of importing around 4,000 metric tons of gold.
Right.
Okay, so that's what? That's 4 times of what the LBMA does usually.
Right.
Okay, period, right? How much does the Shanghai Gold Exchange do, right? Sorry, in a year. You know this number. I'm going to tell you, right? 1,450 metric tons. That's how much because they're pure physical market, right? In terms of delivery, but the withdrawal is like 70% rate.
Right.
So 1,450 metric tons. So that's still less than what the COMEX is doing right now in comparison. So to just like reloop back to what you said, you're correct, Vince. The COMEX right now, as it stands, I might change, right? Like down the road, because this is like unusual.
It could reverse. We know it could
reverse, right? We know it can reverse, right? But for now, it's number one. It's the number one physical delivery market in the world
on a pro rata basis. You said a couple things that reminded me of something that that Dave said. I mean, really, you said a lot of important things there. One of the things that I think is worth exploring is Dave touched on it when he said, well, we are all touching on it from different areas. And we talked about this before I hit record, and that is what's the gold coming back for? Now, I made a statement about, they're replenishing Fort Knox, offhandedly. But everyone, including your reference by Ronan Manley, is alluding to the same concept. We're repatriating for an urgent or pressing need. So, Dave, you actually started off talking about this. Would you mind taking that? The point was, just to help you get started on it. The point was, why are we bringing this metal here? And you had alluded to the fact that we're satisfying something. What is it you think we're satisfying?
It's interesting. Well, first, I just want to make sure that we're differentiating between delivery and taking possession.
That's
So
right.
when you say, X amount of tons is delivered on the COMEX, it isn't really delivered to the end, the owner, unless the owner withdraws it. And they
Right.
make it a pain in the ass to withdraw the bars. I've done it, and it was a pain.
For you and me, maybe, but not for JP Morgan if they need it. But
Well,
that's another
that's
conversation. That's another
yeah, of course
conversation.
they're part owner of the COMEX, right?
Right, right, right.
So, but and it took me a while to come around to thinking about this, or accepting that this could be what's going on, because for the longest time, I have not really trusted the numbers that the COMEX puts out, right? They're not audited independently.
Right,
They're produced by the banks. If what the banks are showing us is honest and ethical, it's the only part of their balance sheet that is honest and ethical, right? Their
right,
financial reporting.
right, right,
So,
right, 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 right.
but let's just take the numbers at face
They don't
value.
cheat on precious metals. They only cheat on the other stuff, right?
Exactly.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think, and I'll just preface this with, for a couple weeks there, all we heard about was Trump was gonna go look at the bars at Fort Knox. Quietly this week, that conversation's kind of faded, in my opinion. Haven't heard much about it this week.
Right, right,
And so, there, for the longest time, there's been the school of thought and again, it's impossible to get evidence unless you can actually get inside the vaults. Germany wanted evidence and, of their gold inside the Fed vaults, and the Fed wouldn't let them. Right.
right,
That's why they repatriated back in 2013. Half of their gold held by the Fed, well, a little less than half. But there's been a school of thought, and we're called tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists, that the gold that is held in custody by the Fed on behalf of the U.S. Treasury is no longer there. And
right.
I think for me, it's not even really an argument or a debate. I don't think it's there. And I think what we could be seeing is, in this scramble by all these countries to get their gold out of London, we could be seeing the Fed doing the same thing to replenish the gold that it's used for purposes of rehypothecation, manipulating the market, leased out to central banks, et cetera. They see what's going on here and what's coming down the pike. And I think there's a very definitive possibility that the Fed may be looking to, refill the empty cupboard.
Right, right, right. Um, you know, the
Oh,
interesting
one other
thing is,
point here, because I wanted to
and I'm
circle
sorry.
back to this also, just to clarify for the audience. When Eric refers to monetary gold, he's referring to the 400-ounce bars that central banks traffic in, not
Right.
the 100-ounce bars, not the kilo bars. It's the big boy bars.
That's where I was going with. Eric brought up a point about about monetary gold, and Ronan Manley's point. By the way, if Ronan's watching this, the first thing I wrote about Chinese market structure was based on research that I found by Ronan Manley. So I know that the man knows his
He
market
does
structure.
incredible research.
Oh yeah, he's great. He's great. And
Incredible.
yeah, that's
Incredible.
that's
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 what
where
say.
that's where I figured out that all the gold that goes into China stays in China. It was like a
Yep.
commercial I wrote at the time. All right, so anyway, but the 400-ounce bars are the required bar for monetary gold. So I have a question for you, purely like not rhetorical at all. You remember in 2020, right? Both of you remember in 2020 when there was a I think I was lied to. This is what I'm going to start with, right? So you're going to answer if I was lied to. In 2020, when everyone was freaking out about the COMEX backwardation in futures, I reached out to a couple people. One of them was the late, great George Giro. And I said, this doesn't make sense. Why are these 400 bars just not being EFP'd over here? You know, why are they not just being EFP'd over here? And then we'll just worry about it later on. And why is JP Morgan not taking advantage of this arbitrage that Eric was talking about? Well, if it's too high there and it's too low here, then we'll just do an EFP and swap the financial desire, the panic. And George said to me back then, he said, well, and he was right. But again, this is another one of those pretenses. Back then, the refiners and smelters in Switzerland and northern Italy had shut down because of COVID. So they couldn't remelt them. They couldn't remelt them, right? And the EFP got stretched and they stopped. And I went, okay, I was satisfied with this explanation. I was like, okay. And then, of course, the COMEX came up with a 400 to 100 swap contract. You remember that, right?
Yep, the ACE contract.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, okay, so this is regulatory arbitrage. The exchanges are stupid, and now they're fixing it. It will never happen again. That's what I walked away from that moment. Something else will break, but not that. And so now you're telling me that the 400-ounce bars were needed, and they couldn't deliver them on COMEX because in 2020, remember that picture I had up there? In 2020, we were repatriating gold, monetary gold, for our own purposes. Whoever we are, could it be the banks? Could it be the federal government? I don't know, but you're telling me that you guys are telling me that monetary gold is only 400-ounce bar gold? Like that's how it works, Eric?
Yeah, so I just want to add to that, right?
Yeah,
First
sure.
of all, I think Dave is right. 400 ounce bars for monetary central bank gold, let's say,
I'm
right?
not challenging it. I'm
For
learning
the
this for the
West
first
for the
time.
Western, well, I look at it this way, right? Look at what Donald Trump is doing with the tariffs.
Right.
It's pretty chaotic. It's pretty crazy. So, if they were to do an audit, I know Dave talked about this and Ronan talked about this. How are they going to get the go back up to spec
Right.
to like let's say you guys talk about the 400 bar monetary gold, right? To what they had back in the 1950s. That was, by the way, the last time they did a full audit of all the votes, not just Fort Knox,
Right.
Denver, West Point, and the Fed votes, right? The Federal
Right.
Reserve. Am I missing anything, Dave? Or did I
Nope,
get all of them?
you
All of
got
it,
it.
right? Okay, good. 1950s, I believe it was 53. Okay, they did it.
Right.
And so back to the 400 pound, I just think that if they were to do it today, that their goal is to just find 8,133 troy ounces, 33 metric tons. Sorry,
Right. Right.
8,133 metric tons, which
And
is
melt that
what
and
is
melt that.
it, which is on the Fed's balance sheet, right? Okay, which
And
is like
that was the
what the
number.
Treasury has.
That was the number from the last time there was an independent third-party audit of the gold held by the Fed on behalf of the Treasury. That was
Right, in the
1953.
1950s, 1953, correct.
1953, Eisenhower was president. It's the last time there's been a real audit of that gold.
Okay. So to continue my story, I think if they were to do it, that's their goal, Dave. And I told Ron and Manny in private as well. That's their goal. So it doesn't matter what they have in there. If it's like a coin bars, if it's 100 ounce bars, 400 ounce, as long as they have the gold there of purity. I'm talking about 90% and above, right?
Right.
Is game.
Right.
I'm just looking at it from a real politique perspective. Like Tom Longo, right? Keep talking about this. They're
Right.
just going to do whatever it takes to make it work.
Well, that's why
That's
the
my
time
perspective.
factor. That's why the time factor
Yeah,
comes into it. You have to get it in the
yeah,
proper form.
yeah.
Dave,
Yeah,
I want to
but
ask you.
just to interject, just to jump in, Dave talked about the 400 pounds ounce bar. The COMEX actually has a new contract with 400 ounce bars as well.
Surprise.
It's a new
Surprise.
contract.
And there
Surprise,
you go.
right?
That's your
And
physical
it used
market.
to be, yeah, it used to be like very low. Guess what happened? Like the volume, right? Guess what happened in the last 2.5 months? A jump. So they imported This is from Michael Lynch. From
Right.
he got the data from the COMEX data,
Yeah,
and it's
Michael's a really good data.
yeah,
Uh,
70 around. I don't have the exact figure, but it's above 70. It's 70 metric tons
right.
of physical gold from the 400.
Let me let Dave jump in here for a second.
Yeah.
Dave, you mentioned, and this is exactly what he's talking about, and I have this is another question, genuine question for me. So, with regard to this 400-ounce bar monetary metal, is that why you think maybe we were delayed in getting our gold together for Germany back in the day? Like we didn't have the proper format?
My understanding is, and again, it's impossible to know. It's just
Right.
based on third party comments at the
Right.
time, is that most of the gold that was shipped back to Germany. So first of all, there was a big movement in Germany, a populist movement and a political movement for Germany to take possession of all its gold that it's held in central banks, not just the Fed, globally central banks. And so Germany requested that they be able to send an official delegation over to inspect their gold held by the Fed. And apparently the gold was being held in 9 different vaults, presumably a lot of it at West Point. And the Fed said, no, we'll let you look at your gold in one vault. And I'm assuming that was the Fed's New York City vault.
Right.
And so when the Fed said no, Germany said, okay, well, we want, and I don't remember the exact number. Let's say that, we hold 1,500 tons on their behalf. They wanted 700 of it back.
Right.
And the U.S. negotiated on 300 tons over 7 years.
Right. And then the headline was, I just want to interject this part. The headline was, they asked for like 2013. And then we said we need 7 years. And then the headlines were, we got it back to them ahead of schedule. Like 7 years.
The funny thing is that they did it in 3 years.
Right.
Oh, when Hugo Chavez repatriated Venezuela's 200 tons of gold, he got it back in 2 months.
Right.
Why was it going to take three years?
Right.
Or up to 7 years. My understanding is that much of the gold that was sent back to Germany was not in the original bars. That a lot of it was coin melt, and other non-monetary metal forms.
Which kind of ties what Eric's saying. We had the metal, but we didn't want to. I mean, maybe we had the metal. Who knows, right? But we sourced the metal. We figured out where the metal was, and we didn't have time to re-smelt it or re-refine it. And so we just gave it back to Germany and said, "Listen, just please don't tell anyone that these are not the right bars." And that's basically what's going on. So maybe that's what's going on in reverse now. Meaning we need 400-ounce bars, to Eric's point, right? Monetary gold. And London's been picked dry, and they have, bullshit stuff. They have a lot of Merlot because the Cabernet has been drained dry. And so we don't have this. Take that flavor, It's a flavor of gold. I don't know, but that's what it seems like is going on in London.
It's actually reversed, Vince. London has 400-ounce bars, and COMEX is primarily 100-ounce bars.
Right.
You see, so they were like, the story is that they gave out is that they were going to convert those 400-ounce bars at London to 100 to meet the COMEX spec. Like that was it back in 2000. Was it the COVID 2020?
Right.
When that happened. So that was the story back then. But this time it doesn't even. Yeah, that was the story back then because they converted. This time it doesn't even make sense because they have like a 400-ounce contract at the COMEX. So why would that story even make any sense? You don't.
The 2020 story. That's part of the point I want to make. The 2020 story I was told was a fucking lie, and now we're seeing.
No, now they have the contract. They have the 400-ounce contract. It doesn't make any sense. No sense. Okay.
Right. Why create
a contract? They can just grab the LBMA bar, dump it, COMEX, done. And they were doing it. They imported 70, let's just say 74, metric tons. They did it, right?
Right.
So whatever that BS story, whoever it's from, it's just complete. I mean, I'm really tired. I think they.
I understand. It's late for you.
I'm talking about all these bullshit stories that we need to filter through. Like, there's so many
You
of
can't
these
stop it
BS
because
stories.
you can't stop it until we get on a TV show
Yeah.
like Luke Gromen to Tucker Carlson and talk about it. But we don't want that to happen because then
Okay.
we might disappear as well. No, I mean Luke didn't disappear. But your
Okay.
point about COMEX
Yeah.
having inferior bars, let me refine what I said. Refine. I
Yes.
can't believe I used that word. COMEX has inferior bars. London has encumbered bars. Like I feel like everything in London has been loaned out. Like look, the LBMA paper market is big. All London has is 800 gazillion, a billion ounces of proper gold, and of that, one bar is unspoken for, and that's why we need to take our gold back anyway. So, uh, what do you guys want to add about gold before we move on to silver? Because
Well, we don't have to talk about it, but there is a white elephant sitting in the room, and that is what's going on with GLD's bars.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about it? Because I know exactly where you're going with that.
well, let Dave start.
Want me to
Let
go?
Dave
Okay.
start.
Let's
Let
let's
Dave
let,
start.
let
No,
Dave do
because
it.
he
I'll
brought
talk
it up.
about it.
Let Dave start,
Yeah.
and then Eric,
Awesome.
you fill him in.
Awesome.
Fill him in. Go ahead,
Okay.
Dave.
Let's do
Well,
that.
I remember when the prospectus for GLD was filed, and
Mhm.
James Turk went through it with a fine tooth comb, and he said that this thing has more leaks in it than a sieve in terms
Right.
of accountability and it essentially enables the custodian of the GLD vault, which back then was HSBC. Now it's HSBC and JP
Yeah.
Morgan.
No coincidence that JPM got involved. But go ahead.
Exactly, because they're the custodian for SLV,
Right. Right.
and it basically allows them to use the gold bars sitting in the GLD vault for their own purposes if they want.
Double duty. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's also, and I actually piggybacked the work that he did in 2004. I wrote a paper about it in 2009. If can find the time, I want to go back through the GLD prospectus again, because they've actually loosened it up even more since 2000.
They have. They have. They made it
Yeah,
worse, right? Exactly.
exactly.
We don't have to
And
give you the
I'd
gold.
like to revise that paper and publish it. It's a lot of work.
Right.
But it's highly probable that the gold that and everyone talks about, oh well, this amount of gold went into GLD, this amount of silver went into SLV. Has anyone seen proof of that?
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah. And so it's also very likely. See, I think when we were talking about what happened in 2020, the gimmicky ACE contract, and some of the other things, measures that they put in place, kicked the physical problem down the road, the physical shortage problem down
Do
the
they
road.
not do anything but kick problems down the road? That's exactly what happened. Right.
Exactly. And we
Right.
may be at the point now where there might not be a can to kick down the road at this point.
Right.
And
Right.
that would be GLD's depleted, um, all the bars that could be delivered in London, from London to people who want possession or entities that want possession, those could be encumbered, or they simply may not be there. And
Right.
I think that could be at the point where we are. I mean, we've always, when I say we, those of us who studied GLD back then intently, we always thought that it was created to divert investor capital away from the physical market, as the COMEX gold contract was.
Just like the new Bitcoin ETF is, same idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Divert investor capital away from buying the actual physical gold and taking possession of it, and say, oh no, here, just buy GLD. It's the same as gold. Well, it's not,
Right.
obviously. Um,
Well, that's the
and
Wikipedia entry from back in the day. Remember that, 1974? We're going to create futures because it will disincentivize physical ownership. Anyway, I'll find that somewhere.
and
WikiLeaks.
there's actually, I think I wish I had saved a copy of it. I think Ronan put out a copy of it the other day or a couple of weeks ago. There's actually a letter between Kissinger when he was Secretary of State and his financial advisors, or
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
where
yeah,
they reference that.
yeah. Yeah, it's like,
They're like, we got
listen,
to
we got to
figure
get
out
the plebs away from physical gold. Let's give them a substitute product. And,
exactly.
and since then, they've been rating it. And by the way, this ties back to the EFP concept. When you see, just a hat tip to Bob Coleman, when you see GLD shares get hard to short, that's because the person who has the shares knows that if you short them, you can take the gold out of the vault and you repurpose it for something else. So JP Morgan's gold is in that vault, and they see, oh, you want to short GLD and you want to take delivery of the gold and use it for something else? Well, that's what happened to silver in 2011. That's what happened there. And so the GLD went up, short rate went up, the lease rate went up, the EFP went up, and that brings us back to what Eric was talking about. Eric, why don't you throw something in on GLD that you wanted to talk
Yeah, awesome. So just want to add on to what you said about the EFP. Just want the audience to understand how it works. So remember what I said about EFP. It's like a bridge between the LBMA and the COMEX, right? Well, EFP is also a bridge between the ETFs and the COMEX and the LBMA. So essentially, the ETFs, like GLD, is basically like a piggy bank buffer zone for the bankers, for the bullion banks. So isn't that crazy? Everything is structural manipulation. That's why I keep saying. Like it's like, when people argue with me about, oh, there's no, yeah, because the manipulation is built from the ground up.
Right.
It's in the system.
It's structural, right? It's not.
It's structural, right?
That's why we caught. That's why we caught a trader years ago, because it's like the person you throw to satisfy you throw to the lions. Yeah, structural manipulation is the problem.
Yeah, that's why I don't focus. I do not focus on the spoofing. Okay, I know Dave knows all about that. The JP Morgan.
I don't focus on that either.
No, okay, but that's symptomatic of it.
Because a lot of people talk about it, right? They bring it up. They talk about it. Sorry, Dave. Maybe I heard you say it, but you don't focus on it. But the structural manipulation is what I focus on, and I'm going to tell you what's happening to GLD. Okay, first of all, so in the past couple of months, what's happening? GLD total physical gold holding in terms of weight is at around 800 to 900 metric tons. Okay. Didn't move much, bounce up and down in that range. Okay. Now, if you take what happened in 2020, 21, that's what everybody loves to look at. Like when HSBC was the sole custodian back then, by the way. There was no JP Morgan back then for GLD, only HSBC. Back then, GLD's total physical gold holding went up almost to, I think it almost touched 1,500 metric tons. So 1,500.
Okay.
It's a hell of a big difference, right? Compared to what's happening right now. And to look back to what you and Bob Coleman said, why is it just fluctuating 800 to 900 these couple months? It's because every time retail deposit physical gold into the GLD, because APs have to facilitate that, right? If you have retail buying the shares, you have to add gold. It's not 1-to-1, but you still have to add it, right? Right. So they add, let's say, 100 tons. Every single time they did that, some AP, like bullion, I'm guessing bullion bank, came in and basically borrowed GLD shares and went ahead and withdrew physical gold.
Right.
That's how they do it. They borrow the shares to withdraw.
And that's one of the loopholes, the financial loopholes that Dave and who was it? Turk?
James Turk, yeah.
James Turk. Yeah, exactly. So they use it as a piggy.
But I got something even better for you guys. You'll love me for this. Okay, you love me. Okay, absolutely.
We already love you, Eric.
You already love me. Okay. So guess what I have? I have the latest audit of the JP Morgan and HSBC GLD vote numbers.
Say
right in front of me. Well, it's an audit.
Go ahead. Let us know.
BV did it. Okay, BV did it. It's a third party, Dave. But do you trust it? I don't know, right?
No.
But they did an audit, and the report came out for the JP Morgan one, March 4th, 2025. So this is right.
Just tell us the numbers, Eric. Tell us the numbers.
Brand new, right?
We don't believe them, but we want to hear them.
March 5th for the HSBC one. Okay, listen to this. Okay,
right.
For the JP Morgan one, because JP Morgan actually has two vaults, one in London,
right,
and one in New York. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the London one. The London one right now, they have 25.86 million troy ounces.
Now that's hold on. I want to understand this. these are the JP Morgan vaults that are spoken for by GLD, or these are their vaults?
GLD, just
Okay.
GLD. This
All
is
right. So,
just GLD numbers, okay?
yeah,
25.86 million troy ounces for
right,
GLD and the
right.
London vault. 735,000 troy ounces for New York.
Okay.
Okay, so 25.8, just say 25.8, right?
Right, right.
25.8 for London, 735,000 troy ounces from New York for New York. Okay.
Okay.
Now I'm going to move over to HSBC.
Right.
HSBC only keep their GLD gold, okay, in London.
That's right.
That's
By
it.
the way,
Okay.
footnote, they were the first bank to pull out and close their U.S. operation. They saw this coming. Go ahead, Eric.
But listen to this. It'll blow your mind, guys.
Yeah.
HSBC only has 2.4 million troy ounces. So JP Morgan, this is the crazy news, my friends. JP Morgan is essentially, in all practical purposes, pretty much the sole,
Yeah.
custodian of GLD physical gold.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Like we were just talking about this, Vince, like 2 weeks ago. We don't know what's happening, and boom, boom, this happened.
Yeah.
They took over just like
You
that.
know, what's not exactly, the HSBC is probably buying the gold for China and pulling it out of the West. When you think about it, they're probably one of
Yep.
the ones doing that, right? I mean, does that make sense, Dave? I mean,
A
you
lot of
close your
sense.
Western shop, you say my allegiance is with Asia because they are. Well, I guess they're English too, I guess, but I mean that's yeah. So that's all
It is an English.
fascinating.
It is an English bank.
Yeah, Hong
Yeah.
Kong.
So my point is GLD gold is back in American hands right now. It's in
Yeah.
American custody.
Oh
Because
yeah.
before, like all of it was HSBC, all of it was in London, right?
Right.
Now you have JP Morgan pretty much taken over 90% of the GLD gold.
To be used
Insane.
as we see fit in America, motherfucker. All right, it's our metal. But that's the point. You own the
Yeah.
metal GLD,
Yeah.
they control it. And ownership is not as important as control when you're dealing with legal entities.
Possession is
Dave, you want to say
10/10 of the law when it comes to physical gold and silver.
That's right. That's right.
I say the same thing, Dave. I told people, I said, like, once you have the thing in your hand, that's 99.9% of the battle, right? Who cares about rare hypothecation as long as you
Right.
have it? That's
Okay, so
I keep
we're
saying
pressed
that
for time.
anyway.
We're pressed for time. What I want to exit gold by asking a simple question, and the simple question, we all have our own opinions on it, and it's basically the question basically is we all have variations of the same answer. That's what's funny about it. Why is the gold being repatriated now? And Dave, you hinted at what your answer is, so I want you to start. So why do you think the most nobody knows, we know that most likely scenario in your mind, broad or narrow, however you want to, why you think there's an urgent, not urgent, but there's a pressing need for the physicality of the gold to be back in the U.S.?
So yeah, that's a great question. And as I mentioned earlier, the powers that be, the people at the Fed, the key people at the Fed, key people in government, they see the writing on the wall in terms of what's going on with the shift. That there's clearly a movement towards reincorporating gold into the monetary system.
That's a good word,
and
reincorporated.
and so and I always have said this. When I dove into the market back in 2001, I mean, I spent 12 hours a day just reading and researching and learning as much as I could.
Right.
And unfortunately, some of the guys that really knew the market back then aren't around anymore. They've either disappeared or passed away. I have always thought that, if the world were to go back onto a gold-backed currency standard,
Mm-hmm.
the U.S. their response when we're trading with China, and China say, we're happy to accept your currency, but it needs to be backed by gold, and we need to have proof of that.
The purpose of the BRICS bridge concept, where it's like, we're not using treasuries. We want to do international trade with you. You got some gold for us? That's basically what you're saying, right?
Exactly. So So the U.S. then says, "Oh well, see, here's a piece of paper that says we have 8,100 tons of gold
Sure.
sitting in Fed vaults." Well, what's going to happen is China's going to say, "Okay, we need to see it first before we accept your currency." And I think that's kind of where this is headed. And I think that's if it is the case that they're refilling the coffers at the Fed and it's the Treasury's gold too. Most people don't, that gets
Not Fed gold, it's Treasury gold for the most part.
Exactly. And which means it's taxpayers' gold.
Right.
If that is in fact what's happening, it's because, the US sees the writing on the wall and they don't want to get caught.
So change is coming to the monetary system, and potential international trade partners need to know that we have what we say we have so they can keep trading with us. I don't mean to simplify what you're saying, but yeah, that's true.
I mean, that was the beautiful thing about Bretton Woods is it imposed accountability on the amount of gold the U.S. had, right? Because foreign buyers of treasuries could redeem those certificates at the Fed in exchange for gold bars, and that's what started to happen in the 60s, and that's what led to closing the gold window because all of a sudden the U.S. had issued more treasuries to foreigners than they had gold to satisfy the claims. If all the foreigners decided they wanted to convert their treasuries into gold.
Now, we issued those treasuries by accident. That wasn't on purpose. So we were sorry about that. No, I'm just kidding. We basically said, "Oh, fuck, you caught us," and it's over. All right, Eric, what do you think, and in the context of anything you want to talk about, what do you think the underlying need or purpose is for us to repatriate gold so aggressively?